up at New Day at Arirang. South Korea is expected to see another record number of new infections, over 20,000 on Thursday, the first following the Lunar New Year holiday. Japan continues to see a rapid spread of COVID-19, with its daily tally hitting another fresh high after just 4 days. Germany has also seen its daily COVID-19 cases soar to a record high, nearing 210,000 on Wednesday. And U.S. President Joe Biden has formally approved the deployment of 3,000 more U.S. troops to Poland, Germany, and Romania in a show of support to NATO allies being threatened by Russia's military moves near Ukraine.
Hello and welcome to this Thursday edition of New Day at Arirang. I'm Mark Broom. It's 8 a.m. in Seoul, South Korea on February 3rd. If you're watching us in Korea, we do hope you had a very enjoyable Lunar New Year holiday.
Yes, Happy New Year. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. Over the next hour, we'll take a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world.
Now, as we seem to do most days, we start with the COVID-19 situation. South Korea is forecast on Thursday to see more than 20,000 new cases, this for the second day in a row.
Now, while the country braces for another uptick, people in South Korea can now get tested and treated for COVID-19 at local clinics in their own neighborhoods. For more on this, our reporter Choi Min-jung is here in the studio with us. Good morning, Min-jung.
Good morning.
So let's start with the local front. So it was the last day of the Lunar New Year holiday yesterday, and we're expecting another uptick in cases today, right?
Right, Mo-gyan, the number of infections surpassed the 20,000 mark for the first time yesterday, and we're expecting the daily tally to hover around that figure for the second straight day today. From midnight to 9 p.m. Wednesday, South Korea saw very close to 18,000 cases. This is the highest figure seen for this period and up by more than 2,000 cases from the previous high set yesterday. We usually tend to see cases decline over the holidays due to fewer tests, but that wasn't the case for this New Year holiday because of Omicron. Compared to a week ago, cases surged by more than 5,000 and also more than tripled from 2 weeks ago. However, health authorities did note that the impact on the number of severely ill patients and deaths is weaker than that of the Delta variant.
And Min-jung, starting today as well, local healthcare clinics are going to be diagnosing as well as treating new COVID-19 patients. This is through the government's so-called one-stop system. Tell us more about that.
That's right, Mark. Starting today, people will be able to get diagnosed and treated for COVID-19 at hospitals and clinics in their locality. And around 700 respiratory clinics and local hospitals will be providing the service. So the one-stop system is basically those with symptoms can visit a nearby designated clinic and get tested for COVID-19. And if they do test positive, the clinic will be in charge of prescribing medication as well as looking after patients being treated at home. We must also note that PCR tests at testing centers will only be carried out for those at high risk, like people aged 60 and over, as well as those who came in close contact with a carrier. So anyone who is not considered high risk but is experiencing fever or respiratory problems can visit a local clinic and get tested for COVID-19 using a rapid antigen test. If the person tests positive, they would then have to take a PCR test.
Right, Min-jung, the current social distancing measures are about to end this week, and so we're automatically seeing we're automatically expecting authorities to announce new measures in the coming days.
Right, Mo-gyan, authorities will be announcing new social distancing measures this Friday, and this comes as the current measures, which include limiting on social gatherings to 6 people and business hours to 9 p.m. are due to end this Sunday. The next measures will have to consider the current virus situation now that the Omicron variant has become the most dominant strain and daily cases are spiking because of it. But health authorities have said that it is best to tackle the spread of Omicron without further strengthening social distancing rules. This comes as authorities are bracing for a potential 5th wave, with the number of infections expected to surge further after Seoul, possibly reaching 100,000 cases a day.
Wow, that's going to be really something if we get 6 figures of new infections every day here in South Korea. That's going to be far beyond what we've seen thus far here in South Korea. But starting next week, from next Monday, I believe, there are going to be new antivirus regulations put in place at cram schools, which are very popular here among Korean students who do this extra curricular educational activity, as well as shopping malls. Tell us more about that.
Right, Mark. Starting Monday, new rules are set to be put in place in these venues to minimize the spread of the virus. In places of learning such as cram schools and study cafes, students must sit 1 seat apart from one another. And previously, the density was limited to 1 person per 4 square meters, but has now been revised to 1 person per 2 square meters. On top of that, authorities have banned promotional events, small concerts, and eating in stores at large shopping malls and supermarkets. Officials have advised movie theaters, concert halls, museums, and art galleries to also strengthen antivirus measures. The stricter rules come as vaccine pass mandates were lifted at these venues last month.
Let's hope the measures would be effective. Now, thank you so much for your report, Min Jung. Talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report. Now, numerous countries around the world are still having a torrid time trying to deal with the rampant spread of the OMICRON strain of COVID-19. Places as far-flung as Germany and Japan are seeing new daily infections reach fresh highs on a nearly daily basis. And this is all despite those two in particular being two of the world's most vaccinated countries.
And elsewhere in Europe, other nations are relaxing pandemic restrictions as Omicron begins to burn out, with deaths and the number of critically ill patients on a general downtrend. Our Kim Sung-min reports.
Japan continues to see a rapid spread of COVID-19, with its daily tally hitting another fresh high just 4 days after seeing record numbers. According to NHK, the country reported over 94,000 cases on Wednesday, of which more than 21,000 were from the capital city, Tokyo. Wednesday's tally is around 170 times more than what the country was seeing a month ago. The soaring figure has left Japan's 35 prefectures placed under a quasi-state of emergency, which may include restrictions on business operation hours and the halting of alcohol sales. Over in Europe, Germany has also seen its daily COVID-19 cases soar to a record high, nearing 210,000 on Wednesday. With this, the country's total tally has now surpassed 10 million. Despite the rising cases, Germany is mulling looser restrictions as death and hospitalization rates remain relatively stable. The country's public health agency reported 196 deaths on Wednesday. In fact, Germany is just one of many European countries to start dialing back pandemic restrictions. Starting Wednesday in France, mandatory mask wearing and work-from-home orders have been lifted. Switzerland is also lifting mandatory quarantine for people who come into close contact with an infected person starting Thursday. Meanwhile, in the U.S., the world's biggest COVID-19 hotspot has seen its COVID-19 death toll reach its highest level in around a year. Data from Johns Hopkins University shows that the death toll rose 39% over the past 2 weeks. This comes as infections subside, with the average daily figure over the past 7 days dropping to some 420,000, down some 44% from 2 weeks ago. Kim Sung-min, Arirang News.
Now it's time for On Point, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. The 5-day-long Lunar New Year holiday, or Seollal as it's known in Korea, came to an end on Wednesday. Now, despite health authorities really urging the public here in South Korea to avoid traveling if possible because of COVID-19, didn't stop millions of office workers visiting their hometowns. Anyway, as we just heard from our Chairman Jung, on Wednesday, South Korea confirmed over 20,000 new infections for the first time in a single day, expecting similar numbers on Thursday as well, as Omicron continues to rip across the country.
And despite the explosion in new cases, the number of deaths and critically ill has been on a downtrend as Omicron has become the dominant strain, replacing the much more potent Delta strain. For more, we connect to Dr. Alice Tan, internist at Ms. Mary Women's Hospital in Seoul. Good morning, Dr. Tan. Hope you had a nice holiday.
Thank you. Good morning.
Well, let's start by getting your reaction on what Mark just mentioned. South Korea reporting more than 20,000 cases on Wednesday. And also, do experts expect this figure to grow exponentially like other countries did?
Well, there's every indication right now that the number of cases will continue to rise. The reason why I say this is because the reproductive rate, the effective reproductive rate is 1.58. Any number above 1 indicates that the infections are spreading. Also, test positivity rose above 7%. And what this means is there are many more positive cases in the community that are simply not being detected by testing right now. We want test positivity to be less than 2%. If we look at what happened in the UK, South Africa, other countries that started the Omicron wave before us, it took them about 4 to 5 weeks to peak in terms of their Omicron wave. South Korea's wave started about 3 weeks ago, and so it looks like we may have a few more weeks before we peak in our wave. There has been some attenuation, I think, in the rate of rise of our peak because of the holidays, and also because we have a very high, relatively very high booster administration rate. If we look at what's going on in Japan, surprisingly, their booster rate for their total population is actually less than 5%. So I think even though they have a very high full vaccination rate, what we know is full vaccination is not enough to protect against infection with Omicron. And so our, I think, booster rate, which is now over 50% for the full population, is what's dampening the rate of rise in our country.
Yeah, it's rather shocking to think that Japan is such an advanced country, but yet they are still so low in terms of booster shots. And even now in South Korea at the current time, even much younger people are still getting booster shots. But a lot of people watching will be wondering, maybe a little bit concerned, if they've received both COVID-19 vaccinations and have had the booster shot, because these were all prepared when we had the other strains before. Can they still contract Omicron? And also, right now, we have close to 800,000 people who have contracted COVID in one form or another and gone on to recover. Can they also catch Omicron?
What's clear with Omicron is that this variant, because of its high number of mutations, is really eroding both natural infection-induced immunity and also immunity from vaccines. But the good news is this. If you have received a booster shot, then your chances of getting infected are much lower. And also, with just full vaccination, so 2 doses of a vaccine, your chances of being hospitalized, developing severe disease, having a ICU admission due to COVID-19, these chances are much lower, even with Omicron. So people get confused because there are different levels of vaccine effectiveness. Does the vaccine protect against just infection, or does it protect against also hospitalization and severe disease? And what's clear is our vaccines still do work in terms of protecting against the development of severe disease. In terms of natural infection, a study out of England showed that prior infection due to previous strains of the COVID virus, they used to offer about 85% protection against reinfection, but with Omicron, that has changed. Protection has now gone down to 19%. So people who have had COVID-19 in the past, unless they've been vaccinated, they can consider that their immunity levels have pretty much worn off.
Now, Dr. Tan, the Beijing Winter Olympics are about to start, and I want to ask, what is your take on the unprecedented virus safety protocols there? And on a side note, Paris 2024, do you think the Games would look a little bit more normal?
Well, I'm hoping Paris 2024 will look completely normal, and we'll be able to have an Olympics with international spectators and all of the celebration and fun that goes along with the Olympic Games. I was fortunately able to participate in the Pyeongchang Olympics here in Korea in 2018, and I know it's supposed to be a celebration. It's supposed to be a gathering and a fun event, and certainly COVID has made it much harder to gather and celebrate. Now, if we look at what happened in Tokyo, they had a similar bubble system going on with their Olympics over the summer. And all in all, it was a fairly successful games in terms of preventing spread of COVID-19 within the bubble. So the bubble for athletes and for all stakeholders. I think there were only 33 infections among 11,300 athletes and less than 500 infections among all stakeholders, despite tens of thousands of participants. The closed loop system in Beijing will be much more strict. Basically, you have to do a 21-day quarantine if you have not been fully vaccinated. And then all eating, sleeping, training, competing will happen within a limited closed loop. There will be very, very limited interaction between athletes and stakeholders and the public. And so I do think that it will be a safe games. My concern, though, is their definition of full vaccination seems to be just 2 doses of a vaccine. They are not requiring booster shots. And as I just said, 2 doses of a vaccine are not enough to protect against infection with Omicron. So they will be testing all participants on a daily basis. Hopefully that will be enough to prevent big outbreaks of COVID-19.
Yeah, well, I suppose needs must, but you can't help but feel kind of sorry for the athletes, especially the young men and women who've spent their whole lives training, and then when they finally get to the Olympics, they're kind of almost living in a temporary prison cell for the course of the 3 weeks or so, when they should be having fun outside of their activities. As always, Doctor, unfortunately we're out of time, but we appreciate your insights and we look forward to speaking to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, as the West strokes fears Russia might invade Ukraine, the Biden administration has ordered 3,000 more U.S. troops to Eastern Europe. Stressing the deployments are a temporary measure, the Pentagon insisted the troops are not going to fight in Ukraine. Kim Hyo-san reports.
The U.S. will be deploying additional troops to Eastern Europe.
As part of this commitment and to be prepared for a range of contingencies, the United States will soon move additional forces to Romania, Poland, and Germany.
The Pentagon announced Wednesday that the new deployments include 2,000 troops to Poland and Germany. In addition, around 1,000 American troops based in Germany will be transferred to Romania. The spokesman stressed the move is aimed at temporarily bolstering the U.S. and its allies' defensive positions.
These are not permanent moves. They are moves designed to respond to the current security environment. Moreover, these forces are not going to fight in Ukraine. They are going to ensure the robust defense of our NATO allies.
The deployments could also signal Biden administration's willingness to take more proactive military moves as Russia's buildup continues, despite ongoing diplomatic efforts to try and resolve the Ukraine crisis. Moscow immediately criticized Washington's announcement, calling the deployments, quote, unfounded and destructive. Unsurprisingly, the head of NATO welcomed the U.S. decision, describing the deployments as, quote, defensive and proportional. Saying the move is a powerful sign of U.S. commitment, he added it sends a clear message that NATO will do whatever is necessary to protect its allies. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
Inflation in the Eurozone hit a fresh record high for the second straight month in January, spiking 5.1% on year, the first time it topped 5% since 1997 when related data was first collected. Eurostat says the record is attributed to soaring energy prices, which accounted for 28.6% of the inflation surge. Food, alcohol, and tobacco prices accounting for 3.6%. In December of last year, inflation in the Eurozone was up 5% on year.
South Korea is not considering lifting import curbs on Japanese seafood, even though Seoul is now a formal member of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. At a press briefing this week, Japan's Chief Cabinet Secretary urged Seoul to lift the restrictions since it's now a member of RCEP. However, Yonhap News Agency cites a South Korean government official who said Tokyo needs to first take actions to alleviate public concerns over the safety of its food products. Seoul has banned all seafood imports from 8 Japanese prefectures near Fukushima since 2013 due to concerns over radiation. On Tuesday, South Korea became the 11th country to formally join RCEP. The other members are China, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and 6 economies from Southeast Asia.
And now we cross over to our Oh Soo-young for Global Insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks very much, Morgan. It is indeed time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. Just over a year since a military coup overthrew a democratically elected government in Myanmar, the junta continues its brutal crackdowns and repression of the people and the press. The United Nations says over 1,500 people have been killed and 8,800 held in custody during the year-long protest against the military. Global efforts to pressure the regime with sanctions and refusal of recognition of the regime haven't worked. We discussed the situation today with Phil Robertson, Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch's Asia Division. Very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, happy to be here.
Well, now, Mr. Robertson, a year has passed since the February coup last year, and this, of course, reversed the progress in democracy that Myanmar saw for about a decade. And, well, even before the junta's takeover, though, the human rights situation, it had been deteriorating in the country. What shape is it in now?
We have seen a sharp decline in the human rights situation in Myanmar since the military coup. To be honest, it is as bad as you can imagine. The current situation is the regime is committing crimes against humanity against its people. The various different monitors of the international community, the civil society groups are all looking at the situation and trying to figure out how it could possibly get worse. But so far, there seems to be no bottom to this. We've seen over 1,500 people killed. We've seen well over 11,000 people arrested. We're seeing shelling in various different areas of the ethnic areas. We're seeing attacks on civilians happening on a regular basis. The military is engaged in its 4 cuts program, where it basically treats civilians in any area where the military is operating as potential enemies, with attacks on civilians being a core part of that. We've seen massacres in Karenni State. We saw one on Christmas Eve where 39 people were stopped at a checkpoint, were bound, were shot, and then were burned in their cars. This included children. Also, 2 workers of the Save the Children charity were also killed there. Torture and detention has become systematic. We've got as many as 100 people who have been tortured to death in custody. And there's no accountability for the security forces as they continue to rampage through the country, trying to force people to stop protesting, to stop resisting the military regime. On this other side, we have People's Defense Forces who are increasingly resisting the military regime. And that has also involved public bombings. It has involved attacks on civilians who are seen as being close to the military. So on both sides, the violence is escalating. The civilians are being hit very hard. The situation is getting worse by the day.
Well, as you mentioned, people who are already vulnerable, such as women and children, and of course the Rohingya population, they've been among the most affected. How precarious is their situation?
Well, it's a good question. The UN just came out with their assessment of the humanitarian situation in the country. They're estimating that almost 25 million people, which is about half of the country's population, were living in poverty by the end of 2021. This is a huge step back from the previous 8 years where, you know, the democracy period had allowed the economy to flourish and people were doing much better. The UN currently assesses that 14.4 million people are in urgent need of humanitarian assistance, that they are facing food insecurity. And so the entire country is being affected by this collapse of the economy with inflation and the loss of value of the baht, the shutdown of much of the banking system. Many of the people, the foreign investors who are pulling back, the collapse of the tourist industry, all these things have affected people across the country. And women and children, of course, are being hit very hard, as are the ethnic minorities. Now, you asked specifically about the Rohingya. There's over 1 million of them in the refugee camps in Bangladesh. Their repatriation is on indefinite hold because there's no likelihood that they'll be able to come back with the military government in control, because it was the military that committed crimes against humanity and acts of genocide against them in the first place and chased them out. But I think also the Rohingya still in the country have been locked down in camps. They are effectively facing the crime of apartheid, as we documented in a report last year. And the situation for them has not improved either. So across the board, there's really no good news on the issues of humanitarian issues or human rights.
And again, as you briefly mentioned, the situation with the junta cracking down on human rights defenders and journalists, humanitarian workers. The footage that we're getting overseas, it seems almost unreal, just journalists being beaten up on the streets, being randomly detained, and, well, just all these crackdowns and explosions. And what is the danger that they face, and is there anything that the international community can do to protect them?
Well, journalists are certainly at risk. They are seen as people who are conveying information to the outside world that the junta doesn't want them to see. And so we are seeing the journalists being forced into hiding, reporting from hiding, being targeted for arrest. There was someone who documented the silent strike that took place on International Human Rights Day, which was on December 10th last year. That journalist was arrested for going outside to take photos of the silent strike, which was everybody stayed home and it was the country was entirely quiet. And he was beaten to death in custody by the police. So many of the journalists have been forced to flee the country. They are now either in Mae Sot or Chiang Mai or on the India border. A number of them have gone even further overseas, third countries. Human rights defenders are also on the run. You know, there are literally thousands of people, activists, who have now fled to Thailand and who are operating at the border, you know, getting information, getting news out, providing support back into the country. You know, it is sort of setting up as a struggle for the long haul again, as we saw during the previous times when there were military regimes for almost 50 years before 2011.
And well, Western governments have been highly criticised for simply sitting back and watching this as this situation continues to spiral. And it seems that all they've been able to do really is just offer rhetoric about pressure and sanctions and withholding recognition of the military junta diplomatically. But would you say those things have worked at all over the past year? What is keeping the Burmese military in power?
Well, we have seen actions by the international community to raise these issues, and there have been targeted sanctions by a handful of countries, particularly the United States, the European Union, Canada, and the UK. Outside of that, we're not seeing the kind of pressure we need. And the sanctions that they have imposed have been not sufficient. They're not going far enough. The targeted sanctions that we want on the military, top individuals, and the entities, the business entities, and the various different aspects of the military, these are the things that need to be pushed much harder. And we were hoping for more sanctions. We've seen a few more on the first-year anniversary, but not enough. And particularly, we're missing oil and gas revenues, which is one of the biggest sources of foreign revenue for the military junta. So we want to see more. We want to see effective action, but there's also a major problem that the international community is really split, particularly at the UN Security Council. And the UN Security Council would be the key for a global arms embargo, which we want to have imposed, and also on a referral of the situation in Myanmar to the International Criminal Court for prosecution of top leaders of the military regime, because Myanmar has not ratified the Rome Statute that created the International Criminal Court. And the UN Security Council is the only way then to have that court have jurisdiction of what's going on in Myanmar. And neither Russia nor China will allow that to happen. It's the same split that we saw for other countries like Syria at the UN Security Council, where despite the horrible situation on the ground, the UN Security Council remains paralyzed because of that diplomatic split. And so what we end up with from the UN is a lot of statements. What we end up from a lot of other countries are a lot of statements. We saw many of them in this just past few days. But the people of Myanmar are becoming cynical. They're like, you're going to talk us to death when we need assistance, we need support. Give us something that is really effective. Don't, just give us another statement.
And well, last March, a month after the crisis, the coup broke out, the leaders of the United States, Australia, India and Japan, they vowed to work together to restore democracy in Burma. What efforts have they been making towards that? And do you think they've been trying hard enough?
Well, the Quad, as that grouping is known, if you look at those four countries, only the United States has done anything. Australia, India and Japan have taken no targeted sanctions, have done nothing, in fact, that really would constitute any sort of serious pressure on the military regime. Japan, in fact, continues to offer slots at its training academy to Burmese military officers. Australia, despite having passed Magnitsky sanctions in December, have yet to impose those on anyone, and we've urged them to use these on the situation in Myanmar, but they haven't done so yet. Even South Korea, which has a great deal of influence in Myanmar because of its economic ties, has done nothing. We have urged countries around the world to join a wider coalition to pressure the military junta to come back to the bargaining table to actually end this violence, to comply with the 5-point consensus that they signed with ASEAN back last April. And nothing has happened outside of just that few group of countries who have raised issues. But, we need more.
Well, as you said, businesses are still doing business with the junta, and, well, some say that stronger sanctions will be ineffective as they will only hurt regular people and not the military regime. What do you think about that argument?
Well, the people of Myanmar are asking for stronger sanctions. There is a great deal of unity for a stronger position by the international community. And in fact, the people of Myanmar have been sanctioning themselves. That is what this civil defense movement is. It is a mass strike where people are refusing to go to work, and it also is an economic boycott. There was a silent strike that took place the anniversary, February 1st, across the country. Again, people not going out, people closing stores. And the military was arresting shop owners for refusing to open their businesses. So what you see is that the people of Myanmar are prepared to use economic tools and economic weapons in their fight against the junta. Why is then the international community being so reticent to do so? And it's important also to note that we are talking about targeted international sanctions. We're not talking about the widespread across-the-board sanctions that we saw previously in the 1990s and early 2000s against Myanmar. So this is looking at specific targets that are either the military or the businesses that are controlled by the military. There are two massive conglomerates, the Union of Myanmar Economic Holdings and the Myanmar Economic Corporation, which are conglomerates that are operated and run by the military for the benefit of the military. And these are the companies that need to be targeted, along with state enterprises like the Myanmar Oil and Gas Enterprise, which is where the revenue from the gas fields in the Gulf of Martaban are coming in, and from which both Total in France and Chevron just withdrew. So we're seeing some pressure, but we just need to see more. And those people who are claiming that sanctions hurt the people should talk to the people. And the people are saying, we need your support now, take action, because it's the economic weapon that we have that will make the country ungovernable and give us an opportunity to have some leverage on this military regime and bring them to the negotiating table.
And of course, Human Rights Watch has been at the forefront of monitoring the situation and also calling on governments to take effective action and making an effective response, really. And well, what measures or actions is Human Rights Watch seeking for Burma?
Well, we have been very clear that we want to see action on the international arms embargo. There are too many countries that are still selling weapons to the Myanmar military junta. Obviously, that's Russia and China, but there are others as well. We've asked for a global arms embargo from the UN. If we don't see that from there, we want to have pressure by various countries on their partners. So, for instance, Ukraine, which people are talking about, is in fact one of the countries that have been selling arms to the Burmese military junta. And, you know, the United States and the EU should tell them not to do that anymore. We also want to see, as I mentioned, accountability for the atrocities that are taking place. And we need to see some sort of international mechanism that will work. If we cannot get it to the International Criminal Court because of the blockage of China and Russia at the UN Security Council, then we need to find some other system, some other, for instance, ad hoc international justice mechanism that could be created to hold the generals of Myanmar accountable for what they've done. You know, there's a long list of things we want. There's a long set of recommendations that we need to see implemented. But right now, it's really not enough leverage to force the military to stay its hand. And we're seeing a real tug of war where the military is using force, often lethal force, against the people to try to stop them from protesting, stop them from resisting. And the people are using their economic tools and, in some cases, armed resistance to fight back. And this is tearing the country apart. We're going to see more violence. We're going to see more human rights abuses in 2022 in Myanmar. And the international community has to do more than just be a bystander.
Well, hopefully the next time we talk, there'll have been some constructive steps towards really alleviating this year-long crisis. But I'm afraid we're out of time today. That was Phil Robertson, Deputy Director of Human Rights Watch's Asia Division. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Tens of millions of South Koreans will head to the polls to vote for their next president in just over a month from now. And tonight offers people their first chance to see how the four main candidates can handle the pressure of a live televised debate. Our political correspondent Lee Kyung-in reports.
Tonight, South Koreans will watch the first live debate between the four main presidential candidates. Taken to the stage will be Lee Jae-myung of the ruling Democratic Party, Yoon Suk-yeol of the main opposition People Power Party, Shim Sang-jung of the Justice Party, and An Cheol-soo of the People's Party. Candidates will first discuss two topics, real estate market and national security, spread over two 20-minute sessions. They will then debate topics of their choice as well as on the job market and economic growth. It will be aired on South Korea's three major broadcasters, KBS, MBC, SBS, from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Korea time. The debate was supposed to be a one-on-one between the frontrunners, Lee Jae-myung and Yoon Suk-yeol. But after complaints from the other campaigns, all four candidates agreed to participate in Thursday's debate. Lee and Yoon had tried to hold their initially planned two-way debate on January 31st. But it was canceled due to a dispute over the DP's demand that notes be banned. The PPP cited the need for notes as they have scandals they want to accurately pin on Lee. Soon after the cancellation, Lee announced he was holding a two-way debate on Wednesday with Kim Dong-yeon of the New Wave. He demanded the debate be solely focused on policies, not on personal scandals. For the event, Lee brought no notes with him. Lee said deploying additional U.S. THAAD anti-missile system in South Korea would only amplify a sense of national insecurity, indirectly denouncing Yoon's recent pledge to bring in more units. The PPP criticized Wednesday's debate for failing to verify the candidates' ethical qualifications, adding that it plans to propose holding a rescheduled one-on-one. And tonight will perhaps be a preview of that. Yoon is expected to address the land development scandal surrounding Lee. Lee, on the other hand, is likely to focus on showing the public that he can be trusted to provide the most sensible policies. The two minor candidates, An and Shim, are said to be planning on challenging the two frontrunners on various issues. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
So this evening, people here in South Korea will be able to watch the first live televised debate between the four main presidential candidates who are all vying to replace President Moon Jae-in in the Blue House. Kim Do-yeon tells us who exactly they are and what are their motivations for running.
The ruling Democratic Party presidential candidate Lee Jae-myung was most recently the governor of South Korea's most populous province of Gyeonggi-do. He began his political career in 2010 as the mayor of Seongnam City and before that was a lawyer. But Lee worked in factories during his teens and still has an arm injury from that time. He earned his school diplomas through the Korean version of the GED before studying law at college. He's now known for his direct and sometimes fierce way with words.
이번 대선은 과거로 회귀할 것인지 미래로 전진할 것인지가 결정되는 중요한 선거입니다.
Lee won the primaries in the first round, beating the likes of former Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun. Now he faces challenges, such as the recent polls showing the majority want to change the ruling party, the rumors over his involvement in the Daejangdong land development scandal, and his use of abusive language toward his family members. The main opposition People Power Party candidate Yoon Suk-yeol had been a prosecutor all his life, having loyalty to law, not people, as he once said. He was appointed as the prosecutor general for leading the investigations into the corruption scandal that led to former President Park Geun-hye's impeachment. But Yoon decided to resign over the intensifying feud with the current government, triggered by his investigations into former Justice Minister Cho Guk, and later he decided to run for president.
국민 여러분은 저와 우리 당의 정권 교체의 엄중한 사명을 주셨습니다.
Despite lacking political experience, Yoon won the PPP's nomination. Now, the political novice will have to use the debate to show he has the ability to handle state affairs and clear up family scandals. The Justice Party presidential candidate Kim Sang-jung is a four-time member of South Korea's National Assembly. As a university student in the mid-1980s, she jumped into labor rights movements when South Korea was experiencing a fast economic boom and many blue-collar workers were left without protection. Now a leader for the country's Progressive Party, she is vocal on issues such as LGBTQ rights and protecting the environment.
정의당이 큰 정당이 아니라도 20년간 신념을 지켜온 정당과 사람이 꼭 필요할 때가 있습니다.
On her path this time, she narrowly beat her competitor and the party's former leader Lee Jeong-mi. During the last presidential election in 2017, despite earning the most votes by a progressive party in recent times at 6.17%, she came last among the 5 major candidates. The minor opposition People's Party candidate An Chul-soo was a medical doctor and then an IT CEO who made antivirus software. Later, as a professor and mentor, An gained popularity among the younger generations, paving the way for him to enter politics. His first bid was in 2012 as an independent candidate, but he dropped out in the middle to support another candidate. But An says that will not be the same case this time.
저는 대통령 선거에 출마한 이유가 제가 대통령이 되고 정권 교체를 하겠다. 그렇게 나온 겁니다.
But unless his ratings go up drastically, observers say the possibility of another alliance between An and Yoon as a single conservative candidate will be a key topic in the coming debates. 김도현, 아리랑 뉴스.
And for a look at what's going on around the world, we have our Lee Seung-jae joining us from the Arirang newsroom. Good morning, Seung-jae.
Good morning to you guys.
So let's start in Bahrain then. That's where the defense minister of Israel is currently staying right now. There's a lot of tension in the Gulf region as we speak. What exactly is going on?
Well, Mark, just like you said, the Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz did begin his visit to Bahrain on Wednesday. Now, this after we saw missile attacks on the UAE by Yemen's Iran-aligned Houthi movement during a visit by Israel's president back on Monday, which, by the way, was the 3rd attack in 2 weeks by the Houthis. Now, the visit by Gantz also marks the first time an Israeli defense minister has visited the Gulf nation, or even that the Israeli military aircraft has even landed there. Now, this was all made possible by the U.S.-brokered Abraham Accords signed by Bahrain, the UAE, and Israel, which was built on common interests and concerns over Iran. Now, however, in disclosing Gantz's official visit, the Israeli defense minister made no mention of the recent Houthi attacks, nor did he give details of the security talks with Bahrain. Now over to Peru this time, as the country's President Pedro Castillo on Tuesday swore in new Prime Minister Hector Valer, replacing Mirtha Vasquez, who resigned Monday due to a disagreement with the president. Now, Valer also becomes Castillo's 3rd prime minister after just 6 months in office. Valer was elected as a conservative lawmaker in July before switching sides to a bloc promoting constitutional change earlier this year. Now, the new prime minister has been open about his support for amending the country's market-friendly constitution. And this is important, as President Castillo said he wanted to redraft the constitution to prioritize public investments in health and education, not to mention higher taxes for multinationals. Castillo also named his finance and energy ministers, although his new cabinet still needs to be confirmed by Congress. Now, according to Brazil's National Space Research Institute, deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon set a new January record, adding to concerns over surging destruction in the world's biggest rainforest. From January 1st to the 21st, nearly 360 square kilometers of forest cover was destroyed, an area more than 6 times the size of Manhattan. Now, by comparison, deforestation in January 2021 accounted for 83 square kilometers, less than a quarter of the latest figure. Now, environmentalists predict another devastating year for the Brazilian Amazon in 2022, where deforestation has surged since President Jair Bolsonaro took office in 2019. And finally, a man seen waving a face mask, which he had removed from his face, interrupted Pope Francis's general audience at the Vatican on Wednesday, shouting, "This is not the Church of God," before being taken away by police. Now, the Pope did hear the shouting, although it's unclear if he understood what the man was saying. Now, after being taken away, though, the Pope asked those in the audience hall to join him in saying a prayer for the man.
A few minutes ago, we heard a man who was screaming, shouting, who had some kind of problem. I don't know if it is physical, psychological, or spiritual, but he is a brother of ours who has a problem. I would like to end by praying for him, for our brother who is suffering. Poor man, because if he was shouting, it is because he is suffering.
Now, according to witnesses, the man was also heard shouting the word mask and was sitting alone at the back of the audience hall away from the section where most people were seated.
Good morning. Well, it's a rough start to the workday after the long Seollal holiday weekend. And of course, freezing temperatures are making things even more difficult. Cold wave alerts are in place across the central regions, and it's going to stay colder through the end of the weekend. Well, tomorrow is Ipchun, the beginning of spring, according to seasonal indicators, but it's going to feel nothing like spring for the next few days, more like midwinter. Even daytime highs will go down to sub-zero temperatures from tomorrow, and this weekend is shaping up to be a bitterly cold one. Dryness continues in the east. A dry weather warning is in place in Ulsan and Busan again. Cold and dry conditions elevate fire risk, so please be careful. Central inner regions are having lows below -10 degrees Celsius this morning, and winds are making things even colder. Afternoon highs as Seoul will be at the freezing mark. Southern provinces will be chillier this afternoon, going up to 5 degrees Celsius in Daegu. Busan topping out at 8 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Air quality will be normal to good across Korea under mostly sunny skies. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. Mark and I will be back at 8 a.m. Korea time Friday for our next edition of our newscast. I'm Kim Mo-kyan.
Yeah, you finally got through that, Mo-kyan. Well done. It's been a long holiday, hasn't it? So hard to get back into the work mode. I'm Mark Broom. Have a great day. Thanks as always for watching. Until next time, goodbye.